This is the Convene podcast. My name is Maggie, digital media editor. How does the maker movement intersect with business events, and how can we tap into it for more meaningful experiences for our participants? The founder and president of Make Community reflects on why people become makers and the role the maker movement can play in events. Bringing the maker movement to events. Written and read by Michelle Russell, editor-in-chief of Convene.
Toward the end of the first episode of the recent PBS series, A Brief History of the Future, futurist Ari Wallach says that when he first started the documentary, intended to be a journey to seek the individuals and ideas that can shape a better, more sustainable future that each generation can build upon, he thought that the storyline would revolve around technology. And yet, as I talk about what people are working on, what do they want to see happen in futures, they talk about being human again, Wallach says. And what's most surprising to me is the desire to start making some decisions about what do we want to leave behind and what do we want to start creating more of that we've lost. Being human again and creating more of what we've lost, like making things with our hands, are at the heart of the maker movement, defined by MIT Sloan Management Review as a cultural phenomenon that celebrates shared experimentation, iterative learning, and discovery through connected communities that build together, while always emphasizing creativity over criticism. While makers reclaim the human impulse to build or create and to belong, they don't live in the margins of society. They contribute significantly to the global economy. The maker economy is thriving, according to a recent article in Forbes. From arts and crafts products sold on Etsy, through to inventors and using crowdsourcing platforms to connect with potential buyers, makers play an important role in today's economy as designers, manufacturers, employers, and taxpayers. How does the maker movement intersect with business events, and how can we tap into it for more meaningful experiences for our participants? Convene cast a wide net for ideas, speaking to maker experts, destination marketers, and a furniture manufacturer in Mexico who went all in on a local craft initiative for its brand presence at a trade show. We even reflect on how the handiwork of makers has made events memorable for us. We hope this collection of stories helps shift the conversation about the future of face-to-face events, where we embrace the shiny new tech tools while also weaving in more of what makes us human again. Heart of Being Human. The founder and president of Make Community reflects on why people become makers and the role the maker movement can play in events. Dale Daugherty started noticing all these people doing cool projects in the early 2000s, he told Convene. I was just fascinated by them. They were so interested in the work they were doing, their projects. Leveraging his background in publishing and technical writing, Daugherty launched Make magazine to break down those cool projects for readers. He founded and is president of Make Community, which, according to its website, has been at the heart of the maker movement, celebrating everyone from tech enthusiasts to crafters to homesteaders to scientists to garage tinkerers since 2005. That was the year he started publishing the magazine. The following year, Daugherty planned the first Maker Fair held in San Mateo, California. The fair was intended to be a place for makers to showcase their projects and have a conversation with attendees about them, even though he said he had no idea whether the public would be interested in such an event. Unlike a traditional craft fair, the buying and selling of items was not the objective. The makers may not even have had a business goal for their projects, he said. We started reaching out to people who didn't necessarily use the term maker to describe themselves, he said, using maker to refer to the audience in the first issue of Make magazine as an Uber term to connect people who do projects. It started catching on as a term people started to use to identify themselves, these small communities of people who had a shared interest, he said. The projects featured at the first fair were largely electronics or robotics, but also included crafts like lace making. The maker and DIY community was starting to flourish at the time, in part because tech was becoming cheaper and easier to use, he said. In the past, you may have needed a degree to create some of the projects, but now it's possible for people to pick up things by themselves, find other people doing it, and share ideas back and forth, he said. That's how you get a community going. Doherty chose an old fairground for the first event because he said he liked the vibe of the fair. The idea was to update it. What if, instead of pigs and pies, it was rocks and robots? We put out a call for makers and said, just bring your project. Initially, I think I had to beat the bushes a little bit. But the concept, a mix of country, art, crafts, science fair, caught on. Around 2010, Doherty's company wrote a playbook for and began licensing maker fairs, which started popping up in different parts of the world. There are now hundreds taking place each year all over the world, of all sizes, held in rural communities and big cities, including Shanghai, Shenzhen, Tokyo, and Rome, which hosts the largest maker fair, planned by different entities. The LA Maker Fair, for example, is organized primarily by the Los Angeles Public Library, which has its own team dedicated to the event. The only Maker Fair that Doherty is still actively involved in, the mothership, is Maker Fair Bay Area, he said. We did that last October on Mare Island, which is an old naval base about 23 miles northeast of San Francisco. The 2024 Maker Fair Bay Area will return there October 18th through 24th. It's beautiful, right on the waterfront. I put that one together. That's been the template that other people can follow, he said. The Bay Area Maker Fair features hands-on activities for all ages and interests. Hundreds of makers sharing their project skills and insights, and talks and demos from top makers. Maker fairs are also held in schools. Doherty could immediately see the early events tapped into an unmet need among students of all ages, attracting lots of kids. I could see how excited they were by this. They wanted to participate, he said. They wanted to become makers. He also found that teachers were coming to Maker Fair looking for creative projects for the kids. They would all say they're bored in school. Kids are not engaged in learning. Doherty champions maker spaces at schools to give people access to tools to create projects and to spend time practicing the craft of making. What makes it hands-on learning is using your physical body as well as your mind. It engages kids. So much of school for them is being told what to do, he said. It flips that around so that they are in the driver's seat. They get to do things. They get to decide what to learn, what to make. That really enhances their motivation and keeps them focused and engaged. Doherty thinks the need to involve kids in the maker movement has become more acute since the pandemic. We see the lack of engagement growing. We see problems like absenteeism and even declining enrollment because kids aren't even going to traditional school if they can find an alternative, he said. I think kids could really develop the confidence in their own learning ability, understand that they can learn differently than other people, and be just as successful. There are no conferences for educators promoting passive learning, like put kids in seats and talk to them all day. There's nobody saying that's a good idea, yet that predominates. You want to foster their curiosity, and then they begin to figure it out for themselves. One train of thought is that quarantining during COVID reignited the maker movement, that people with more time on their hands turned to new hobbies. While Doherty found truth in that, He also thinks that the pandemic worked against us in many ways. Key to making is sharing, and that happens best in person, he said. It's very much an intentional connection. Usually things like hobbies, and this could be painting or electronics. Once you start doing it, you meet other people doing it. People who have been doing it for 20 years still welcome people who are just getting started. The pandemic shut down all the maker spaces, both in the community and schools and libraries, he said, each of which responded in different ways. One of the things that maker spaces did during the pandemic, which I was very proud to cover, was they became factories for PPE, personal protective equipment, masks, face shields, and all these other things, because governments couldn't figure it out. All these communities throughout America and throughout the world, they took designs and set to work making these things and then delivered them to hospitals and doctors and nurses. It was just a great example of the resiliency that comes from having this capacity. These people were not medical people. They didn't know any of this, but they learned. They asked questions and they figured out they could do it. I think that comes down to a basic confidence that you could figure things out and contribute. There's an overabundance of stuff we buy as consumers, he said, but as producers, we can make stuff and it means something to us. I think part of being human is to engage in that process. Dougherty thinks we are at an interesting inflection point. To what degree does technology impact society and culture and bring change in some great new ways, but also foster bad ways of interacting, specifically on social media, he said. I think one of the things that is special about the maker community is it is supportive and generous, he said, welcoming new things and creative work rather than attacking them, compared to the often contentious nature of social media. That's one of the things I really cherish about Maker Faire. For these 2 days, we're doing it. You just feel like the vibe is there and everybody's just happy, open, engaged, welcoming. They're not walking around like critics or unhappy consumers. They're like, boy, I'm participating. This experience is wonderful. It really does bring out the best in me and my peers. Bringing the maker movement to events. Not surprisingly, Make Communities' Dale Dougherty thinks a good way to enhance the in-person experience at all kinds of events is to incorporate the maker movement. That could mean having an off-site activity and a maker space to create something tangible. But in general, he finds collaborative workshops a beneficial departure from event sessions that typically follow a classroom model. How do you reach people? Throw up PowerPoints on the wall and talk all day long? How much do people walk away with? Dougherty said. What matters is what peers do in a group, not what you're doing to them, but what happens when they talk, when they work together. When Dougherty sees professionals like teachers working together on a hands-on project, he said he's impressed by how congenial everyone is and the nice feeling in the room. You're reaching a side of them that doesn't often get pulled in. Everybody's creative, but we don't think we are. We don't get reinforcement for that. We don't try because we worry someone's going to judge us. In the workplace, he said, we're always being looked at and judged. How do you let people shine in a different way? One of the things I have always thought about for business, and we did some pilots early on because when I started this, we had some tech conferences and we did this in the evening. We'd invite people to bring something, a project that they do on their own time. You'd be surprised by what people do, whether it's their hobby or their side project. Giving attendees the opportunity to share hobbies or projects they are passionate about demonstrates that they're not entirely defined by their work or career, he said. Others realize, oh, this is a well-rounded person who might be an engineer by day, but they're building this kid's entertainment thing or whatever by night. I think that the idea that employees have a life outside of work is a good thing. It's a way for people to connect to other people in that organization differently.
If you enjoyed this episode, Do give us a 5-star review and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. For more industry insights, visit pcma.org/convene. Until next time.